Farmer helps injured Native American. 24 hours later, the entire tribe approaches on horseback. What seemed like a simple act of compassion transformed into something much greater. With the arrival of the tribe, accompanied by magnificent horses and a mysterious offering, the farmer was confronted with something beyond gratitude. Now he would have to face a choice that would change not only his life, but the entire destiny of his land. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The relentless Arizona sun burned the parched land of St. Michael's Ranch like a branding iron on raw leather. John Matthews ran his rough hand across his sweaty face and contemplated what remained of his property. The pastures, once lush and green, were now a yellowish carpet of dry grass that crackled underfoot. The main reservoir, which had overflowed in times of plenty, now showed only a trickle of muddy water at the bottom, surrounded by cracked earth forming geometric patterns of despair. For 3 years, rain had not visited these lands with generosity. What began as a normal drought had transformed into the worst dry spell the region had ever witnessed. John observed the few remaining cattle from his herd, thin and panting, competing for the sparse shade of a mesquite tree. In the past, more than 500 head of cattle grazed across these fields. Today, they barely numbered 30. Mary, his wife of 25 years of marriage, appeared on the porch of the main house carrying a gourd of water. Her graying hair was tied in a simple bun, and the wrinkles around her eyes told stories of worry and sleepless nights. She knew him too well not to notice the weight he carried on his shoulders. "John, you need to rest a bit," she said, offering him water. "Standing here looking won't make the clouds appear." He drank the water in small sips, savoring each drop. Water had become more precious than gold in these lands. The artesian well he had drilled the previous year still provided water, but with increasingly diminished flow. With each passing day, the sound of the pump seemed weaker, more tired. "Mary, Samuel came to see me today," John said, avoiding his wife's gaze. "He said he can't stay any longer. His family is suffering hardship." Samuel had been his foreman for 15 years, a trusted man who knew every inch of the ranch. His departure would mean that John would be practically alone to take care of everything. The other ranch hands had already left in recent months, seeking work in the cities or on ranches that were still resisting the drought. Mary sighed deeply. She knew this day would come. "And what did you tell him?" "That I understand his situation. I can't ask a man to watch his family go hungry for my sake." John looked at his calloused hands. "Maybe it's time to accept Dr. Crawford's offer." Doctor Crawford was a businessman from the city who had been insisting on buying the ranch for months. He offered a fair price, enough for John and Mary to start a new life somewhere else. But that land wasn't just property. It was the inheritance left by John's grandfather. It was where he was born, grew up, and built his family. "This land has been in our family for more than 100 years, John. Your grandfather faced worse droughts than this and managed to resist. But never with so little support," he replied, his voice heavy with sadness. "In the old days we had neighbors. The community helped each other. Today, everyone fights for their own survival." The couple remained silent for a few minutes, observing the horizon where the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in orange hues that contrasted with the arid landscape. It was impossible not to admire the beauty of that sunset, even amid so much suffering. "I'm going to walk around the pastures before dark," John announced, rising from the rocking chair. "I need to check if the cattle found enough water today." Mary nodded, knowing that these walks were more a way for John to process his thoughts than an actual necessity. He knew each animal by name and cared for each one as if they were his children. John followed the path he knew by heart, passing by the old corral where he once had purebred horses, by the shed that stored the tools, and by Samuel's house, now empty. With each step, memories of better times accompanied him. He remembered the 4th of July celebrations they organized in the yard, with musicians coming from far away and tables laden with traditional foods. He recalled the births of calves in the spring and the joy of seeing green pastures after the first rains of the year. As he walked, his thoughts were interrupted by a strange noise. It sounded like a muffled groan coming from the direction of a pile of rocks near the dried creek. John frowned and altered his route, heading toward the sound. Among the rocks and cactus thorns, he found something that made his heart race. A young Native American man, appearing to be about 20 years old, was lying on the ground, clearly injured and in serious condition. His brown skin was burned by the sun, and a bloody wound on his left leg indicated that he had been there for some time. John hesitated for a moment. Relations between the ranchers in the region and the Native American tribes had been tense for decades. Stories of conflicts and mistrust passed from generation to generation. Many landowners saw the natives as land invaders, while the tribes fought to preserve their ancestral territories. But in that moment, John didn't see an enemy. He saw only a human being in pain, a young man who could have been his son, in urgent need of help. The young man had his eyes closed, but his irregular breathing showed that he was still alive. John looked around, making sure he was alone, and approached slowly. The young man opened his eyes upon sensing his presence, and for a moment, two men looked at each other in silence. In the Native American's eyes, John saw no anger or fear, but an impressive serenity, as if he accepted his fate with tranquility. Without thinking about the consequences, John took the canteen of water. He always carried and offered it to the young man. The water was precious, perhaps his last reserve for the journey back, but at that moment it didn't matter. The young man drank eagerly, and John could see the relief on his face. "You're badly hurt," said John, even knowing that the young man probably didn't understand English. "I need to take you to my house." To his surprise, the young man shook his head negatively and pointed to his wound, then to the horizon. With gestures, he tried to communicate that his tribe would come looking for him. John understood that he should leave him there, but he couldn't abandon someone in that condition. He took off his own shirt and tore it to make an improvised bandage for the young man's leg. The young man groaned in pain but allowed John to tend to the wound. Throughout the process, he kept his eyes fixed on the rancher, as if memorizing every detail of his face. When he finished, John offered the rest of the water and stayed there, until he was sure the young man was a little better. The sun was setting completely, and he knew Mary would be worried about his delay. "I'll come back tomorrow to see how you are," said John, even doubting that the young man understood his words. To his surprise, the Native American gently held his arm and spoke in halting English. "Thank you. You good man." John was surprised to hear the young man speak his language, even if simply. This made the situation even more touching. He nodded and began the journey back home, carrying in his chest a mixture of concern and hope that he couldn't explain. John arrived home when the moon was already illuminating the yard. Mary was on the porch rocking in the rocking chair with a worried look fixed on the road. Seeing him, she sighed with relief and stood up to receive him. "You took a long time." "I was starting to worry," she said, noticing that her husband was shirtless and had a different expression on his face. John told her everything that had happened, from the moment he heard the groan to his farewell to the young Native American. Mary listened in silence, just nodding her head occasionally. When he finished, she was thoughtful for a few moments. "You did the right thing, John, no matter who it was. It was a life that needed help," she said, touching her husband's arm. "But you need to be careful. If the neighbors find out that you helped a Native American, they could create problems." John knew she was right. The tension between ranchers and Native Americans in the region had increased in recent years, especially with the drought. Some property owners blamed the tribes for occupying lands that could be used for grazing, while others spread stories about cattle theft and invasions. "I don't regret what I did, Mary. If it were one of our children injured in a strange land, I would want someone to help them." The couple had lost their only child as a baby 20 years ago. It was a wound that had never completely healed, and perhaps that's why John felt so touched when he saw that young man in need. The next morning, John woke up before dawn as usual. After checking the animals and the water level in the well, he decided to return to the place where he had found the young man. He took with him a thermos of fresh water and some biscuits that Mary had prepared. Upon arriving at the pile of rocks, he found the place empty. There was no sign of the young Native American, only some stains of dried blood on the ground and the pieces of shirt he had used to make the bandage. John examined the surroundings and found tracks leading northward, where he knew there were Native American territories. "I hope he managed to get home safely," he muttered to himself, feeling a strange sense of emptiness. John spent the rest of the day organizing the few chores that remained on the ranch. Without Samuel, everything seemed heavier and more time-consuming. In the late afternoon, he was fixing a fence near the house when Mary appeared running, her face pale with fright. "John, you need to see this," she said, pointing to the dirt road that led to the ranch. From the horizon came a sight that took their breath away. A delegation of about 15 Native Americans approached on horseback, creating a cloud of red dust that rose against the blue sky of late afternoon. The riders mounted with impressive elegance, as if they were an extension of the animals themselves. Their horses, magnificent and well cared for, trotted in organized formation. John felt his heart race. He didn't know if they were coming in peace or with hostility. He took the shotgun he kept to scare off predators, but Mary held his arm. "Wait, let's see what they want first," she said, with an intuition that always guided her in difficult moments. At the front of the group came an older man with long, graying hair adorned with colorful feathers. His clothing was different from the others, indicating his position of leadership. Beside him rode the young man John had helped the day before, now with his wound properly bandaged, and mounted on a black horse of impressive beauty. The group stopped about 20 yards from the house. The leader dismounted with solemn movements and approached John and Mary. His eyes were deep and carried the wisdom of many years. When he spoke, his voice was grave and measured, but surprisingly clear in English. "I am Chief Thomas of the Cherokee tribe. I come to thank the man of good heart who saved my son, Caleb." John looked at the young man, who respectfully nodded in his direction. The resemblance between father and son was notable, not just in physical features, but in the serenity they both conveyed. "I only did what any person would do," replied John, still a bit nervous about the situation. "No," said Chief Thomas, shaking his head. "My son told me everything. You gave your water, your shirt, your time. In our tradition, a saved life creates a sacred debt that must be honored." The chief made a sign, and 2 warriors brought a leather bag that they placed at John's feet. When the rancher opened it, his eyes widened. Inside were dozens of small gold nuggets, as well as silver necklaces and ornaments. "I cannot accept this," said John, trying to return the bag. "I did what I did out of humanity, not expecting a reward." "That's exactly why you deserve it," replied Chief Thomas with a smile. "A man who helps without expecting anything in return is rare in these times, but that is not all." The chief made another sign and the rest of the group moved aside, revealing something that left John and Mary speechless. Behind the riders, a herd of approximately 50 cattle walked placidly. They weren't ordinary animals. They were larger, stronger, and their coats shone even under the strong sun. "They are water cattle," explained Chief Thomas, "a special breed that our ancestors created generations ago. They have a natural instinct to find water, even in the driest places. During drought, they can smell underground sources and lead the herd to them." John couldn't believe what he was hearing. For years he had heard legends about these animals, but thought they were just stories told by the old cowboys. "But why are you doing this?" asked Mary, who until then had remained silent. Caleb, the young man who had been rescued, dismounted and approached. Although he still limped a bit, he seemed much better than the day before. "My father taught me since I was small about the prophecy of the waterman," he said, with more fluent English than the day before. "It says that when the land is thirsty, and a man of pure heart gives his last water to save a son of the earth, the spirits of nature will repay his kindness." "Our medicine men have spoken of this prophecy for decades," added Chief Thomas. "When my son told me what happened, I immediately knew you were the man of the prophecy." John looked at Mary, who had tears in her eyes. The situation was so surreal that it seemed like a dream. After years of suffering and losses, hope arrived in a way they never would have imagined. "There is one more thing," said the chief, with a more serious air. "These cattle are not just a gift. They carry a responsibility. You will have to protect them and use them to help other ranchers who are going through the same situation as you." "What do you mean?" asked John. "The water. Cattle must be shared with those who need them. When other ranchers are desperate from the drought, you must lend them so they can find water. This is the only way to maintain balance." John understood that it wasn't just a gift, but a mission. He had become the guardian of something sacred, responsible for helping his community. "I accept," he said, extending his hand to Chief Thomas. The chief smiled and shook his hand. "Oh, then so be it. Caleb will stay here for a few days to teach you how to handle the water cattle. They are docile, but they have their peculiarities." As the warriors prepared camp for the night, John and Mary were still trying to process everything that was happening. In less than 24 hours, their lives had completely changed. The ranch that was on the brink of collapse now had a new chance to prosper. In the following 2 weeks, St. Michael's Ranch underwent an impressive transformation. The water cattle, true miracles of nature, had found 3 underground sources that John never imagined existed. Caleb had taught him and Mary the signs that the animals gave when they smelled water, how their nostrils dilated, how they stamped their hooves on the ground, and how they mooed differently. "It's as if they talk to the earth," explained Caleb, observing one of the cattle digging with its hoof in an apparently dry area. "My ancestors said that these animals were blessed by the spirits of the rains." A few days later, in that exact spot, a new vein of crystal-clear water sprouted. John quickly built a small improvised reservoir, and soon the surrounding pastures began to turn green again. The contrast was impressive. While neighboring ranches remained arid and yellowed, St. Michael's displayed patches of green that looked like oases in the desert. Mary observed everything with a mixture of joy and concern. "John, people are going to start asking questions. We can't hide what's happening here." She was right. Already in the first week, some neighbors had passed by the road and noticed the changes. Joe Bennett, owner of the neighboring ranch, stopped to talk with John late one afternoon. "John, man, what have you been doing here?" "It seems like your land is resisting the drought better than mine," said Joe Bennett, with poorly disguised curiosity. "Luck, Joe. I found some springs that hadn't dried up yet," replied John, avoiding going into details. "Springs? I've lived in this region for 40 years and never seen a spring in that part. And these different cattle, where did they come from?" John felt the weight of his neighbor's investigative look. "I bought them from a breeder up in Colorado. They're a special breed, more resistant to drought." Joe nodded, but his eyes remained suspicious. "If you've discovered some secret to face the drought, it would be good to share it with the neighbors. We're all in the same boat." After Joe left, John talked with Mary about his concern. He knew he couldn't keep the secret forever, but he also feared the consequences of revealing the truth about his alliance with the Native Americans. The situation became even more complicated when Colonel Baker, the richest and most influential rancher in the region, appeared at St. Michael's accompanied by 3 henchmen. Baker was a corpulent man with a thick mustache and an authoritarian look. He owned more than 12,000 acres of land and had a reputation for solving problems by force. "Matthews, I need to talk to you," said Baker, dismounting from his horse without waiting for an invitation. "I've been receiving worrying information about your property." "What kind of information, Colonel?" asked John, remaining calm despite the tension. "They say you've been associating with Indians, that you have an Indian sleeping in your house." Baker spat on the ground with contempt. "You know that these pests have been invading properties in the region, stealing cattle and threatening honest families." John felt his blood boil, but controlled himself. "You're misinformed, Colonel. There's no Native American living here. Then explain how your ranch is green while all the others are drying up. Explain where these strange cattle came from." Baker came closer, trying to intimidate him. "Some neighbors are suspicious that you made some deal with the savages, that they passed you information about hidden water sources. Even if it were true, what would be the problem? The water doesn't belong to anyone, it's from nature." "The problem is that you're being selfish," exploded Baker. "While we lose everything, you prosper. That's not right. The community has..." The right to know your secrets. Mary appeared on the porch, attracted by the discussion. Her presence seemed to calm the mood a bit. "Colonel Baker, with all due respect, this is our property," she said firmly. "My husband doesn't owe explanations about how he takes care of his lands." Baker stared at her with anger, not accustomed to being challenged, especially by a woman. "Mrs. Matthews, you don't understand the gravity of the situation. If there really are Indians involved in this, you could be putting the entire region in danger." "What kind of danger?" asked John. "The Indians don't give anything for free. If they're helping you, it's because they want something in return. Probably information about our properties, our herds, our defenses." Baker made a dramatic pause. "You might be being used as spies." The accusation was so absurd that John almost laughed, but he realized that Baker was serious. The man really believed his own words. "Colonel, this is ridiculous. There's no conspiracy here." "Then prove it. In the coming days, I'll send some men to observe your property. If there's nothing hidden, you won't mind the surveillance." Baker remounted his horse and departed with his henchmen, leaving a cloud of dust and a heavy atmosphere in the air. John and Mary were worried about the veiled threats. That night, Caleb, who still remained at the ranch helping with the water cattle, noticed the couple's tension. "Did something happen today?" asked the young Native American. John told him about Baker's visit and his accusations. Caleb listened to everything in silence with a serious expression. "My father warned me this could happen," said Caleb. "For many years there has been mistrust between our peoples. Some ranchers fear our presence even when we try to help." "But you really are just helping, right?" asked Mary, with a hint of insecurity in her voice. "Ma'am, our tribe has always lived in harmony with nature. We don't want the ranchers' lands, we just want everyone to be able to live together in peace. Water is sacred, it must be shared." John believed the young man, but he knew the situation was getting complicated. "Maybe it's better for you to return to your tribe for a few days, until things calm down." "I can't leave yet. The water cattle haven't finished their work here. They've found signs of a very large source, but they need a few more days to locate it exactly." In the following days, the surveillance promised by Baker intensified. Armed men began to circulate around the ranch, observing all movements. John tried to maintain his normal routine, but the constant pressure was affecting everyone. The situation reached its peak when Joe Bennett appeared at the ranch, visibly nervous. "John, I need to warn you. Baker is organizing a meeting with all the ranchers in the region. He wants to form a militia to expel the Indians from the area." "A militia?" asked John, alarmed. "He has convinced several property owners that the Indians are planning to invade our lands. He spread the story that you're collaborating with them." Joe lowered his voice. "John, I've known you for more than 20 years. I know you wouldn't do anything against your neighbors. But there are a lot of people nervous because of the drought, looking for someone to blame. And what do you think I should do?" "Be honest with me, John. Do you really have contact with Indians?" John looked into his neighbor's eyes and made a decision. "Yes, Joe, they helped me, but not in the way Baker is saying." He told the whole story, from the encounter with Caleb to the gift of the water cattle. Joe listened to him attentively, without interrupting. "My God, John, you saved the life of the chief's son." "I did, and they repaid with generosity. But it was never about invasion or conspiracy." Joe was thoughtful for a few moments. "Look, I believe you. You've always been an honest man, but Baker won't accept this version. He's already decided to cause problems. So what do you suggest?" "I think you need to talk to the chief. If there's going to be a confrontation, it's better that everyone is prepared." Joe paused. "And John, if things get ugly, you can count on me. I won't let them do an injustice." After Joe left, John talked with Caleb about the situation. The young Native American was worried about the news. "I need to take this information to my father immediately. If there really are plans to form a militia, our tribe needs to prepare. Caleb, I never wanted it to come to this. When I helped you, I was just thinking of doing what was right." "And that's what you did, John. But sometimes doing the right thing generates consequences we can't control." Caleb touched the rancher's shoulder. "Don't blame yourself. Our alliance is sacred, and my people will honor it, whatever happens." Next morning, Caleb departed toward his tribe's territory, taking with him the worrying news about the militia that Baker was organizing. John and Mary were left alone with the water cattle, which continued restless, sniffing incessantly at a rocky area at the back of the property. "They're trying to tell us something," observed Mary, seeing the animals concentrate always in the same place. Caleb said that when they get like this, it's because they've found something important. John agreed. During the 2 weeks of living with those extraordinary animals, he had learned to interpret their behaviors. That specific agitation indicated the presence of a very large water source, possibly an aquifer that could supply several properties. On the third day after Caleb's departure, Chief Thomas returned to the ranch, this time accompanied by a larger delegation. Besides the warriors, he brought with him a very elderly man with completely white hair and tribal tattoos that covered much of his body. This man carried a staff adorned with feathers and precious stones. "John Matthews," said the chief, with solemnity, "I present to you Isaiah, our wisest medicine man. He has come to perform the rain spear ritual." John and Mary looked at each other, not completely understanding what it was about. "The water cattle found something very special on your lands," explained Chief Thomas. "Our ancestors called it the heart of the earth, an underground source, so large that it can supply this entire region for many years." The medicine man Isaiah approached, his ancient eyes shining with ancestral wisdom. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but carried with authority. "Young John, the spirits of nature chose your land to reveal this gift, but there is a condition that must be met before we release the waters." "What condition?" asked John, with curiosity and apprehension. "The water from the heart of the earth can only be released if there is unity among all the peoples of the region. Ranchers and Native Americans must make peace and commit to sharing this sacred good with wisdom." Mary stepped forward. "But how will we achieve that? The ranchers are organizing a militia against you." Chief Thomas smiled sadly. "That's exactly why the ritual is necessary. When the waters emerge, everyone will understand that nature makes no distinction between races. Thirst affects everyone equally, just as abundance should benefit everyone." The medicine man raised his adorned staff. "This is the rain spear, forged by the first inhabitants of this land hundreds of years ago. When planted in the right place, it will open the way for the underground waters to find the surface." John observed the artifact with fascination. It was a work of art, but it also emanated a spiritual energy that he couldn't explain. "However," continued Isaiah, "the ritual will only work if there is at least one representative from each group present. We need some ranchers to witness and participate in the ceremony." The situation seemed impossible. How to convince the ranchers, especially Baker, to participate in a Native American ritual when they were organizing a militia to expel them? It was then that Joe Bennett appeared at the property, breathless and clearly agitated. "John, thank God you're still here. Baker scheduled the meeting for this afternoon. He's convincing everyone that the Indians are going to attack." Joe stopped when he saw the Native American delegation and became visibly nervous. "Joe, you don't need to be afraid," said John. "These are my friends. Chief Thomas, I present to you Joseph Bennett, my neighbor and longtime friend." The chief approached respectfully. "Mr. Joseph Bennett, it's an honor to meet you. John has told us of your loyalty and honesty." Joe, still fearful, nodded timidly. John took the opportunity to explain about the ritual and the large water source that had been discovered. "A source capable of supplying the entire region?" asked Joe, incredulous. "Come see," said Mary, leading him to where the water cattle were concentrating. Upon arriving at the location, Joe was impressed with the behavior of the animals. They dug incessantly, and it was already possible to feel the moisture in the air. A small puddle of crystal-clear water had formed in the hole they were making. "My God," murmured Joe. "If it's true, there's water here, and a lot of it." Chief Thomas approached. "Mr. Joseph Bennett, your property is adjacent to this one. If our source is fully released, your ranch will also benefit. The water will follow its natural course and create a creek that will pass through your lands." Joe's eyes shone with hope. His ranch was almost lost, just as John's had been. "What do you need from me?" he asked. that you help us convince the other ranchers to come here, not for a confrontation, but to witness the ritual. When they see the miracle of water, they'll understand that we're not enemies." Joe was thoughtful. "It won't be easy. Baker is hot-blooded, convinced that you're a threat." "What if I went along with you?" suggested John. "If I showed up at the meeting and explained everything that happened?" "It would be very dangerous, John. Some are seeing you as a traitor." Mary touched her husband's arm. "John, if that's what needs to be done, I support you, but don't go alone." Chief Thomas intervened. "I will go with you. It's time to speak face to face, man to man." "An Indian at the ranchers' meeting?" said Joe, alarmed. "Baker might see that as provocation." "Or as an opportunity for dialogue," replied the chief calmly. "Sometimes the courage to take the first step is what changes everything." In the late afternoon, an unusual group headed to Colonel Baker's house, where the meeting had been scheduled. John and Joe walked alongside Chief Thomas, who was accompanied only by Caleb, a brave and risky decision. When they arrived, about 15 ranchers were already gathered in the yard of the main house. The conversations ceased immediately when they saw the Native Americans. Baker rose abruptly from his chair. "What kind of joke is this, Matthews? You brought the savages here?" "Colonel Baker," said John, keeping his voice firm, "I came here to clarify the truth about everything that's been happening." He told the whole story from the moment he found Caleb injured to the discovery of the great water source. The ranchers listened to him in silence, some with skepticism, others with growing curiosity. "And you believe this story of magical cattle and sacred springs?" asked Baker with contempt. It was then that Chief Thomas stepped forward. "Colonel Baker, I understand your mistrust. Our peoples have a history of misunderstandings, but today I come to propose something different." "And what would that be?" "That you come to Mr. John's ranch tomorrow at dawn. If we can make water spring from the earth in front of all of you, we prove that our intentions are pure. If we can't, I will leave with my tribe, and we will never return to these lands." The challenge created a murmur among the ranchers. It was a bold proposal that put all the tribe's credibility at stake. "And if you succeed?" asked another rancher. "Then we will share the water with all who need it, ranchers and Native Americans united for the common good," replied Chief Thomas. Baker thought for a few moments. The proposal was tempting. If the Indians failed, they would leave the region of their own accord. If they succeeded, everyone would benefit. "I accept the challenge," he finally said. "But if this is some kind of trick—" "It won't be," assured Chief Thomas. "Tomorrow at sunrise, the spirits of the earth will give their answer." The next morning, a crowd gathered at St. Michael's Ranch. Besides the ranchers of the region, many families of rural workers also came, attracted by the promise of water in times of drought. Everyone positioned themselves around the area where the water cattle continued to dig. The medicine man, Isaiah, began the ritual with chants in his ancestral language. His voice echoed through the silent morning, creating an atmosphere of reverence, even among the skeptics. Chief Thomas and Caleb joined in the chants, their voices harmonizing in melodies that seemed to converse with the earth itself. John and Mary observed everything with tight hearts. If the ritual failed, not only would the Native Americans be expelled, but they would also have to leave their lands, as they would become targets of the neighbors' hostility. The medicine man then raised the rain spear above his head and planted it in the exact center of the place where the water cattle had dug. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The silence was tense, broken only by the wind that swayed the dry leaves. Suddenly, a subtle tremor ran through the ground. The water cattle began to moo in unison, as if they were celebrating something. The earth around the spear began to crack, and small bubbles of air rose to the surface. Then it happened. A column of crystal-clear water sprouted from the earth with force, creating a jet that rose several yards high. The crowd exclaimed in astonishment and admiration. Children ran toward the water, laughing and getting wet. Adults were paralyzed with emotion. In a few minutes, the water had formed a creek that began to flow toward the neighboring properties, exactly as Chief Thomas had predicted. The sound of running water was like music to ears parched by drought. Colonel Baker approached. The source wet his hands, and brought the water to his mouth. It was sweet, pure, invigorating. His eyes filled with tears that he tried to hide. "It's a miracle," murmured one of the ranchers. "No," said Chief Thomas with serenity. "It's nature responding to unity and respect between peoples." At that moment, all the mistrust and prejudice seemed to dissolve like salt in water. Ranchers shook hands with the Native Americans, children played together in the new water, and a feeling of community began to bloom. John looked at Mary, who was crying with joy. Then he looked at Caleb, the young man he had saved, and who, in turn, had saved the entire region. "Thank you," said John to the young man. "Thank you, John. Your kindness saved more than my life. It saved the future of all of us." In the months that followed, the region flourished as never before. The creek created by the source branched out, irrigating several properties. Ranchers and Native Americans worked together to create a water-sharing system that benefited everyone. Mistrust gave way to collaboration, and hostility was replaced by genuine friendship. John and Mary became the natural mediators between the two communities. Their ranch transformed into a meeting point where everyone was welcome. The water cattle continued helping other ranchers find smaller sources, spreading abundance throughout the region. Colonel Baker, transformed by the experience, became one of the greatest defenders of the alliance between the peoples. Sometimes, he would say, "We need a miracle to see what has always been before our eyes." The drought eventually passed, but the unity remained. The children of the region grew up hearing the story of the rancher who saved a young Native American, and with that simple act of kindness, saved an entire community. And whenever someone asked John about the secret of his prosperity, he would smile and answer, "Sometimes the greatest wealth comes from giving what we need most." When I offered my water to Caleb, I never imagined I was planting the seed of our salvation. Mary, now with completely white hair, but with eyes that shone with satisfaction, would compliment, "The land taught us that true abundance only comes when we learn to share, not when we try to keep everything for ourselves." The creek continued to flow, carrying with it not just water, but the promise that kindness always finds a way to return multiplied. And in the silent nights of the desert, when the wind passed through the verdant fields, it seemed to whisper the eternal lesson that love and generosity are the only sources that never run dry. The end of the story. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of John, Mary, and Chief Thomas's tribe touched your hearts as much as it touched ours. This narrative reminds us that even in the most difficult moments, a simple act of kindness can transform not only our lives, but the destiny of an entire community. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on this video. In the comments, tell us which moment touched you the most, and if you've ever experienced situations where generosity was rewarded in unexpected ways. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the transformative power of love and compassion. Don't miss our upcoming content, where we'll continue exploring narratives that show how humanity can triumph over adversity.